Okay, so I uploaded a big render done using basically this high minus 1. Was it exponential value 6? Can't actually remember. Don't want to go away from there. I want to come in here and go to this, this, this. What was I looking for? Yeah, it was 6, 0.6 exponent, 0.6 exponent. And it worked fine. Some little flickering firelight-like effects, which I would guess come from the fact that adjacent frames might not have very similar high points. The high point might leap quite dramatically, and that is, well, I'm not sure what to do about that. There's a few things. One is I could possibly smooth where the high point is. That's not necessarily that easy, honestly. Not to do really well, because I can stop it taking too large a leap, but that would be based on previous high points in the animation. And so at the end of the animation, there might still be a jump if the animation loops, as most, basically all of mine have. So the other option is that, well, the other option is that the exponent is, there's a scale style which is dynamic, to scale by a dynamic exponent as well. Or I could make one, and that would select a suitable exponent, or try to, frame to frame. But then I'm not exactly sure what I'm aiming for that, and I have a feeling that making a good decision about how I determine the exponent would mean lots of tests, which I could do. It's just very time consuming, and would actually really, I hate to say this as well, but to do it well would kind of necessitate making up a render queue, which also isn't impossible. But given that 2 days ago I was thinking about what the final touches I might make to this project are, making well, it's not a huge change, but it's enough of a change to require several days' thought probably to make the render queue good and secure. And then make sure that it works with everything else that's still here, and anyhow. And the purpose of it being to get a lot of results that I can look at in a few days' time to try and determine, my mic is not good, and that's really annoying. But to determine some kind of algorithm for coming up with an exponent. Honestly, I'm not that keen. I'm not that keen because I could set up these tests, but I'm not totally confident in my ability to do good tests or my ability to draw good sort of conclusions about what the... And also, I have a feeling guessing probably is not going to work in this case. So, it does seem like maybe doing something to manage where the high point leaps to might be the best way to get a more consistent range. But there is something else. Which is to not use an exponent, or to have another scale style, which is not exponential. I wonder, I don't know if it would actually help solve this problem. Maybe it's just an adjacent thing I'd like to do, which I might, when I do it I might have to take this problem into consideration. But really what I want is, I need a function, like feeding the height into height to the power x, where x is less than 1, is my function at the moment, or 0 is less than x is less than 1. And getting another number out. So, like, I want to multiply it by a number less than 1. I can figure out where each height lies proportionally between where it is, between the bottom, between 0 and the top height. You know, between 0 and 1, so to speak. And if I just determine another function, another spline, then I can have quite a lot of control over where the balance of the gradient is spent on the screen, I think. It's hard for me to imagine how I build this sort of the options for dealing with that into this setup. And even quite what I imagine that curve looking like. I hate to open up this thing. In fact, it probably... give me new. I said new. Is this supposed to be appropriate? I suppose it is. Make it something like that. So I'm not even quite sure like what the curve would look like. Let's say that the distribution of course, naturally I want that, and this thing doesn't just allow me to select. Okay. So the distribution, here's the height, or here's the number of pixels, and this is the height. So small height of 0, large height of top pixel could be anything. Simple renders could be a dozen, a couple hundred, could be 90,000 or more. But the curve I imagine frequently being like this. So a huge number of zeros, a very, very large number of ones or whatever, and a tiny handful of these. And what I want is pretty much that, I think. Like, that's one way of doing it, it's one way of visualizing it, so that yeah, so that what I don't end up with, because I have just you know, the gradient runs from there to there. That's halfway along the gradient. That's a quarter. That's 3/4. Almost nothing's going to be at the top. Still here, almost nothing will be at the top. But at, you know, whatever that is, 75 plus blah, 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 at 7/8, it's a little bit. But here, you know, you get a good chunk more. The top quarter, you get a good chunk more. So what I would imagine on the screen is just these details, which are just a few pixels high, but even by the time they're 4 or 5, I feel like I'd rather they were occupying that amount of, you know, that amount. I don't know. And I don't know how long my mic's been off yet, but basically I've been saying that I might be getting this wrong. So, and the exponential scaling works in as much as it sort of makes the curve more like that. No, no, more like that. Everything gets reduced with the exponential scaling. It's just that the top ones get reduced more. I think I'm right. And it would be better if the lower ones got increased. If everything got closer to the average. My dog is once again deprived of the only company she desires. Anyhow. So no pixel should appear in front of a pixel that it was previously behind, but every pixel should change its position to get closer to the average. And then over the final one second. Lie down. Ugh. Pixels should get closer to the average. So I don't know, I don't think I'm actually thinking of this the right way up. Just because of, I don't know. You just think a number of pixels and top pixel. I don't know if it's more useful to think of it this way. A larger number of pixels, low down. Similar shape anyway. And what I want is something more like that. And the gradient will still run the entire height. So you still get the brightest pixels will still be the color of the top of the gradient. So some pixels, yeah, have to move forward, but others have to move back. How do I get that distribution right without changing the order of the pixels? Well, some other things I've thought is that I've been using these ints, but there's no reason to use ints to represent pixels in the array. Remember to change back to the data, well, change to a data buffer. But anyway, there's no reason to use ints. I could use floats or doubles. Floats would be really all that's necessary. The benefit of that, well, first off, one benefit might be that it might be easier to scale the output for the size of the output, so that it might be easier to imply that the line is taking up a smaller proportion of the pixel. I'm not really sure if the maths for that works out very well, but it might be something. Probably, when I think about the way I draw the line, really it could be a lot more subtle, and it probably is necessary for it to be more subtle. But anyhow, thinking about it, if I made them floats, they'd be certainly easier to manipulate afterwards in this fashion. There's a brute force way, which is probably might even be interesting in terms of what? The brute force way would be to use what I think in Monkey is called a map, but is a hash table. And as I go through the array the first time, because I'd have to go, I think, through it multiple times, I build the hash table of every occupied level. And somehow then I go, or how do I do it? I build the hash table of every occupied level. And then can I'm not exactly, I'd have to actually check. Then I go through that hash table. I go sorry, because it's like an integer to integer hash table. I think what I do is the reason I'm hesitating even to look this up is because could be a big hash table. I suppose it's never going to be more than a couple of million values, but honestly, I don't know about hash tables that get up to a couple of million values. Where am I looking? Inside maybe STD, collections, map. Container style object that provides a mechanism for assorting key objects with value objects. This is done by using an internal node object that contains a reference to both key and value along with information about the node's value within the map. Each key in the map occurs exactly once, cannot contain multiple. Maps can handle inserting, removing and finding keys in log2 time, proportional to log2 the number of items in the map. Wow. Okay, so let's have a little look at the K and V. Get, remove, root, update. Okay. Updates the value key associated with a key in the map. If the map does not contain key, nothing happens and false is returned. If the rotated value is updated and true is returned. Okay, that's a bit of a problem. Don't wanna do that. Null if the key is not in the map. Well, like I could just brute force it. How many entries? I think I'm going to actually crush my mic. How many entries are going to be likely in this map? Even though the pixels are high heights, there aren't necessarily going to be that many heights. You know, I can't remember what the highest top pixel I've seen, but it's certainly above 100,000, and it probably could get much higher. Should it concern me that potentially I end up with 100,000 entry or whatever map? So, and what am I actually doing anyway when I think about it? This would allow me to find out if a particular height has a value on the screen, or rather, are any of the pixels on the screen a certain height? I think I might just give this a go. It's a real brute force, but it would allow me to totally even out the pixels on the screen. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but in a weird way, I should think through the actual process here anyway. Because what am I actually doing? Sets the value associated with a key in the map. A new key is added to the map and true is returned. Right. If the map already contains a key, associated value is updated and false is returned. Okay. Return if a new node was added to the map. True. False if an existing node was updated. Well, what is it I would really be doing? I'd create my map of ints and ints, because what I'm trying to do is associate. Man, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to associate a new height with every height and keep them in order. So as I parse the array this time, I can create a map of heights. Every time I read a height, I just set that height in the map. But what do I set it to? I could increase its value by 1. I could get it to then set it. Man, okay, I could do that, maybe. I have a feeling this might massively slow down. Okay, I could get it then set. I'm going to have to create a new render program because of the changes I'm about to make here, because I'm starting to think, yeah, I should really do this. But also, when I think about it, I'm going to have to cook a meal soon. So far I've done 22 minutes just thinking about it and discussing it. And one moment. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to the end of coding this, or no, I'm certainly not going to get to the end of coding it just now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to the end of properly just thinking about the logic of what I have to do just now. How on earth am I here? And I definitely want to divvy this off into a new render program because I spent the last few minutes just now thinking about another set of changes. I mean, 2 days ago I was thinking this is maybe just about finished. In fact, even this morning I was thinking that. But actually there are another set of changes which might be better. Because I've been thinking about the data buffer output, or the data buffer sort of editor, the feature that would allow you to experiment with the values using a rendered data buffer, and how difficult I'd find that to fit into the editor as it stands. And one of the reasons is that the software rendering modes exist at all, because actually if the data buffer was just another option alongside the output that was just like whether or not you stored a log, and I just eliminated the standard solid, alpha and addition modes, and just because I am only using the what this would probably mean is that I guess just make a different version of the executable. I just copy my folder. I know that's not the way you do it, and make a different version of it, I would keep this version because it's basically stable. But in a different version, I'd take out the OpenGL rendering. I'd take it out the renderer as well, which means that I would not have to open the Mojo display. I could do purely software rendering, which would be nice. It would probably really reduce the size of the renderer. And I wonder about the order of events here, because I could get into this just now, and it might be wise, but on the other hand, this and those other things I'm speaking about are associated, sort of. Well, they're associated certainly in as much as that it would be much more useful to me to be able to see the results of this on the data buffer display, on a data buffer display. So the question is, should I just bite the bullet, split this code off as it stands? I think it basically works. I think the one thing I might do to it just now is put in a little 1/10 of a second pause before the renderer starts. Once the render project file has been created in the app directory, because that's the only reason I can guess as to why sometimes the renderer doesn't start, is that the render file is not found, or even that that it's not completely sort of finalized. Because if it wasn't found, if it hadn't been written, the old version of the file would be there for the renderer to work on. I can only assume that like I say, for some reason, the file is still in the process of closing. So, anyway, that's an aside. That's the little change I'll make to this. And then I will split it off. This will stay recursor, and what I will rename the new one is just gRecursor. It's effectively the same program, but it will no longer have this button, because these will no longer exist. And I may, because this will change a bit, and some aspects of it might actually become more associated with this, I may just join these two windows into one. So there's just an options window, and I might have draw and render sections in it, but actually I think it would make more sense, particularly as there might be another button that appears up here. Maybe not. It might be that I build the data buffer thing into this, the data buffer sort of, I don't know what I'm going to call it, tester, something, I don't know. If I build that into I got distracted thinking about how a little scheme for evening out this is really help my flickering firelight effect. The more I think about that effect, sorry to come back to it, this has been a long rambling video of me just thinking about what on earth's going on. The more I think about that effect, the more I think smoothing the top height, I don't know what, the high point, smoothing the high point is the only option. It's an annoying thing because I can't really think about a way to do it very well without storing several data buffers at least, and kind of, I don't know doing what, but maybe that's okay. It's a big chunk of memory, but it's not that much. Probably if I'm rendering, be different if I'm rendering very high res, but at 1920 by 1080 each one's, I think, a couple of megabytes, I think. So even if I was storing 10 or something, it'd still only be a fifth of a gig. And I might not need to store that many. I might maybe only need to store 3 if I want to avoid spikes. to give it some thought. But I think that what I'm going to do is I am going to split the code off, get rid of the software drawing modes. It's a bit of a loss. There are things that you can do in the software drawing modes that aren't really easy to do in Gradient. It's just that the addition type of drawing mode is not subtle enough for everything you could get out of it. But on the other hand, I use them so rarely that maybe I would just pop in and use this version if I ever really wanted to. So I'm going to think about shaving off that code. Well, creating a new version of it. I'm going to have to clean up my hard disk in a bit. I've been saving too much of this stuff, and I don't have a big hard disk. So getting rid of software rendering, streamlining the renderer, and building the sort of having a go at any rate with the map redistribution next time.